Hello ladies and gentlemen, Tevaron here and welcome back to my first ever set review for Magic Duels. This time we will be going over the green cards of Kaladesh. And just as a reminder, these are my opinions and raw card evaluations, having never actually played constructed with the cards before. If you would like to check out the previous reviews, just click the annotations on the screen or the links in the description below. First up, we have Appetite for the Unnatural. For a green and 2 generic, we have an instant that lets us destroy target artifact or enchantment and gain 2 life. If only there were sideboards in Magic Duels. You know that old spiel. While the instant speed and life gain are nice, unless artifact decks are everywhere and dominating everything, I think that Reclamation Sage is just a better card to be playing. It also deals with artifacts and enchantments, and leaves you with a body on the board. Arborback Stomper. For 2 green and 3 colorless, we have a 5/4 beast with trample. When Arborback Stomper enters the battlefield, you gain 5 life. So here is the fixed version of Thragtusk. Another card that would be much better suited to sideboards. However, 5 life is a lot, and 5/4 with trample is fairly decent too. Due to the deck building constraints of Duels, this card will probably see some amount of play. Architect of the Untamed. For a green and 2 generic, we have a 2/3 Elf Artificer Druid. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get an energy counter. You can pay 8 energy counters and create a 6/6 colorless beast artifact creature token. I may be wrong, but I think a green and some other color, most likely red, energy deck will most likely want to be aggressive. And this card isn't aggressive. In a deck that isn't all in on energy, it competes for the 3-drop slot with Tireless Tracker, which I feel is a better card, but again, they're both rares and you can only run 2 of them. So maybe she rounds out your 3-drop slot as the 3rd and 4th Tireless Tracker. Armorcraft Judge. For a green and 3 generic, we get a 3/3 Elf Artificer. When Armorcraft Judge enters the battlefield, draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. I think that if you are trying to draw cards in green, that Tireless Tracker is still a better pick in this case. I kind of feel sorry for these cards just living in the tracker's shadow. Now, there previously weren't enough effects that put +1/+1 counters on creatures in Duels for this to be truly good, but this set adds a fair few. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe counters is going to be a whole new archetype. I mean, that would be really cool. And if that's the case, then Armorcraft Judge certainly has a home there. Blossoming Defense. 1 green for an instant that gives target creature you control +2/+2. and hexproof until end of turn. This card may be something you want to play in an aggressive deck. It protects your creatures from targeted removal and pumps them for additional damage. Be careful when running pump spells, however. If you play too many, you won't have enough creatures to actually cast them on. Bristling Hydra is 2 green and 2 generic for a 4/3 Hydra. When Bristling Hydra enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy counters. You may pay 3 energy counters and put a +1/+1 counter on Bristling Hydra. It gains hexproof until end of turn. This card seems quite good. I know I've mentioned several times that an aggressive energy deck is going to be a thing, but just look at this guy. Where else would he go? He gives you enough energy to use his ability once when he enters play, and that ability can save him from spot removal as well by giving him hexproof. I don't think that this is as good as the Hellion, but as you can't run 4 of either, they're both rares, I'll happily windmill slam this guy and dare my opponents to try and cast murder on him. Commencement of Festivities is a green and a generic instant. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to players this turn. So, we get to keep Fog, and this card is also being added. Is Turbo Fog a thing now? I mean, I would think that you would need 1 or 2 more Fog effects, but I'm not sure about that. Is Turbo Fog a thing? Oh god, is Turbo Fog actually a thing? My head hurts. I need to go lie down. Cowl Prowler. 2 green and 4 generic for a 6/6 worm. That's it. 6 mana for a 6/6. At 6 mana, I could be casting Oblivion Sower, Green Warden of Marasa, or Woodland Bellower. At 1 more mana, I could cast Plated Crusher, or Gaia's Revenge. All those creatures are better than this creature. Play those instead. Creeping Mold. For 2 green and 2 colorless, we get a sorcery that can destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. Creeping Mold is a very versatile card. However, there are no sideboards in Duels, as we have stated previously, so unless you need more than 3 Reclamation Sages, I don't think you play this. Unless you want to blow up lands. I mean, it's no one Vuli Acid Moss, thank God. It doesn't ramp you too. Please, for the love of God, don't let this revive land destruction decks. Just calm down, breathe. If they come back, we'll just play aggro and make them cry. That's it. Just play aggro and make the bad old land destruction decks cry. Cultivator of Blades is 2 green and 3 generic for a 1/1 Elf Artificer with Fabricate 2. Whenever Cultivator of Blades attacks, you may have other attacking creatures get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is Cultivator of Blades' power. So I could see this being played in Elves. If Elves still has the stuff to be a competitive deck, then this is certainly a card that it would want. And while 5 mana is a bit expensive, if you untap with this card and a decent board presence, you probably win the game. Also, that +1/+1 counter theme may be an archetype all on its own, as we've said. So that should be interesting as well. Durable Handicraft. For a green and a colorless, we get an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 generic. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. We can pay 5 generic and a green, and sacrifice Durable Handicraft, and put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that we control. So, with this in play, I am voluntarily making all my creatures cost 1 generic more to cast, so that they can be just slightly bigger. No thanks. It slows down aggro decks, and I really don't think that a mid-range deck wants this effect. I may be wrong. This could be interesting with Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, but you can only run 1 of her, so yeah, I'm not super excited about this card, even if a +1/+1 counter deck is a thing. Fairgrounds Trumpeter. For a green and 2 generic, we get a 2/2 elephant. At the beginning of each end step, if a +1/+1 counter was placed on a permanent under your control this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Fairgrounds Trumpeter. So I'm really intrigued. Can a +1/+1 counter themed deck really be a competitive option? Fairground Trumpeter seems to think so, and if you can trigger it every turn, which is a bit more difficult to do on your opponent's turn for sure, then this elephant will get big quite fast. Of note is that it only gets 1 counter no matter how many counters you place that turn. It only gets 1. And at this point, there is little doubt that a counter deck is something that you can build. The only question now is, will it be good? I'm just not sure. I will certainly be testing to find out though. High Spire Artisan is a green and 2 generic mana 0/3 Elf Artificer with Reach and Fabricate 1. So the Artisan is certainly awesome versus spirits. Also, it's another creature that fits in the +1/+1 counter theme. It's an elf, and also a card I think that would be much better suited to sideboards, but as we have mentioned ad infinitum, Duels doesn't have those, so I'm not actually sure how much play this will see. Kujar Seed Sculptor. For a green and a generic, we get a 1/2 Elf Druid. When Kujar Seed Sculptor enters the battlefield, play +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And another +1/+1 counter creature, which is also an elf, though I'm not certain that this is any better than the other elves that already exist in the elf archetype. If the +1/+1 counter deck is good, then this girl will be in it. If it's not, then I'm not sure how much play she'll see. She can be a 2-3 for 2, that's pretty good, and has added versatility since she can also pump up another creature, so yeah, this one is a bit up in the air. Larger than life. For a green and a generic, we get a sorcery that gives target creature +4/+4, and has it gain trample until end of turn. This is another difficult one to pin down. On one hand, it's Titanic Growth at sorcery speed, which is worse, but it also gives trample, which is something other green pump spells at 2 mana or less in Duels don't do. Wild Size does give trample at 3 mana and also draws you a card, and is instant speed. So the question is the extra +2/+2 for 1 less mana worth the loss of card draw and the downgrade to sorcery speed? I'm just not sure. I feel like this card is playable in some number in very aggressive decks. However, I don't think it's ever right to play this as a 4-of. The sorcery speed is just too big a drawback. Still, we shall see. Long Tusk Cub. For a green and a generic, we get a 2/2 cat. Whenever Long Tusk Cub deals combat damage to a player, you get 2 energy counters. You may pay 2 energy counters and put a +1/+1 counter on Long Tusk Cub. This guy. If he also made 2 energy when he entered the battlefield, he'd be broken. As is, he can quickly get out of control if unchecked, and the adding of counters to him is at instant speed with no limit other than the energy you have available. I like this guy a lot. He definitely fits in aggressive energy decks, and almost certainly in any +1/+1 counter strategy that arises as well. Cubs grow up so quickly these days. Nature's Way is a green and a generic sorcery that target creature you control gains vigilance and trample until end of turn. It deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Well, I already liked Rabid Bite, and this card does everything that Rabid Bite does and gives my creature vigilance and trample at the same casting cost. Seems like an objective upgrade. Sign me up. Nissa, Vital Force. 2 green and 3 generic for a Planeswalker Nissa with 5 loyalty. +1 loyalty, untap target land you control. Until your next turn, it becomes a 5/5 elemental creature with haste. It's still a land. -3 loyalty, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. And -6 loyalty, which is worth noting is only 1 more loyalty than she begins with. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. So 5 mana is a lot, as I've said in the past, but I think Nissa is worth it. In fact, I think she is a better Planeswalker than Chandra Torch of Defiance. You don't have to attack with the 5/5 she makes, so she's good at protecting herself. And green is a color that does do a good job at defending its Planeswalkers, unlike red. Also, with an Oath of Gideon out, she can ultimate the turn you play her. I think Nissa is one of the strongest cards in the set, and maybe one of the strongest cards on Duels, period. Ornamental Courage. For 1 green, we get an instant that lets us untap target creature. It then gets +1/+3 until end of turn. Honestly, I'd rather play Blossoming Defense or most of the other pump spells that already exist in Duels. Primal Bellow and Wild Size are better than this too. You can't play too many pump spells, as I've said before, or you won't have enough creatures to cast them on. And I think that this one is too far down the list of playables to make the cut. Alright, please be gentle as I pronounce this card name. Ovia Pashiri, Sage Lifecrafter. That is a mouthful. For 1 green, we get a 1/2 Legendary Human Artificer. For 1 green, 2 generic, and a tap, we create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. For 1 green, 4 generic, and tap, we create an XX colorless construct artifact creature token, where X is the number of creatures that we control. So, this girl has a lot of potential. However, she is also extremely fragile and takes a lot of mana to get real value out of. She seems better versus a slower controlling deck, but those same decks should have the best tools to deal with her. I'm not sure how often you'll be able to keep her alive long enough to generate the type of value she seems capable of though. So, it might be good or even ridiculous. It all depends on how long you can keep her alive. Pima Outrider is 2 green and 2 generic for a 3/3 elf artificer with trample and fabricate 1. Another card for the potential +1/+1 counter deck. I don't think it's quite good enough to see play outside of that strategy. 4/4 trample for 4 is okay, but doesn't really feel strong enough. 3/3 trample with a 1/1 feels a bit better, but still not great in a color that can cast a 4 mana 6/6 with trample and vigilance. I mean, albeit with the help of other colors of mana. Elves has better 4 drops in Lizalana, Huntmaster, and Dwynnon, and I feel like Guardian of the Pack and Bristling Hydra are better in the 4 slot than Outrider as well. But, as we said, +1/+1 counters could be a thing, and if so, that's where Pima Outrider will do the best. Riparian Tiger. For 2 green and 3 generic, we get a 4/4 cat with trample. When Riparian Tiger enters the battlefield, we get 2 energy counters, and whenever Riparian Tiger attacks, you may pay 2 energy counters. If you do, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. This poor tiger is in an awkward position. It's too high casting cost for an aggressive energy deck. You could only pump it once each attack, and it's just a temporary stat boost as opposed to counters, so he isn't a good fit in the +1/+1 counter theme either. I think he's going to be doing a whole lot of bench warming. Sage of Shalia's Claim. For a green and a generic, we get a 2/1 elf druid. When Sage of Shalia's Claim enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy counters. So if you're looking for an okay body and need a lot of energy, then this girl seems pretty good. She may be playable in some number in an aggressive deck due to card number restrictions, but at this point, I don't really think so. She may end up seeing play in a non-aggressive energy deck, but I'm uncertain at this time. Terrain Elemental is a green and a generic for a 3/2 elemental. Well, the bar just got lowered. Looks like we are doing 2 mana 3/2s now, and only one of those mana needs to be a specific color. And while I still think that Sylvan Advocate is a better card than this, it's also still a rare, and I can certainly see the elemental entering the red zone in the near future, so be prepared. Thriving Rhino is a green and 2 generic for a 2/3 Rhino. When Thriving Rhino enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy counters. Whenever Thriving Rhino attacks, you may pay 2 energy counters. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on it. I'm not sure this guy makes the grade, though card number restrictions do push all sorts of things that aren't really playable in Paper Magic into playable status. I could see the Rhino perhaps making the cut in an energy deck, though I don't think I'd want him as a 4/of. Longtusk Cub is better at 2 mana, and several other creatures are a lot better at 3 mana. We'll have to see. Verdurious Gearhulk. For 2 green and 3 generic, we get a 4/4 with trample. When Verdurious Gearhulk enters the battlefield, distribute 4 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. So, this is what I feel is the best Gearhulk in the cycle. It's not my favorite, as stated. I prefer the black one just for personal reasons. That doesn't change the fact that I'm pretty sure that the green one is the most powerful. Though if we get better instants in the future, Torrential Gearhulk could easily take that crown away. On an empty board, he's an 8/8 trampler for 5 with no drawbacks. However, I think he's better with a lot of other bodies to distribute the counters to. So, green seems to have gotten quite a bit of good stuff, yeah? But what's the best? What are the top 5 green cards we're getting in Kaladesh? Well, I'll tell you, or at least I'll give you my opinion. As an honorable mention, I give you Blossoming Defense. It's a pump spell, and it's a counter spell for targeted removal for 1 green mana. If your deck wants to play pump spells in some amount, I think you should probably look here first. Coming in at number 5, Nature's Way. A strict upgrade for Rabid Bite, a card that already saw quite a bit of play. Decent removal in green is hard to come by, and this is slightly better than decent. Coming in at number 4, Long Tusk Cub. This little guy gets out of hand very quickly. It only takes a couple of swings to make you begin feeling uncomfortable about referring to it as little. Number 3, Bristling Hydra. 4 mana for a 4/3 that can grow to a 5/4 with hexproof till the end of turn at any point. Seems like a great deal to me. And if you generate a good amount of additional energy, it's even more ridiculous. Number 2, Verdurious Gearhulk. The best of the Gearhulk cycle in my opinion. So much versatility is present in this card, and it's only 5 mana too. So, what could be at number 1 when what I feel is the best Gearhulk in the cycle is at number 2? Well, it shouldn't be surprising that it's Nissa Vital Force. She's really good. How good is she? Well, she may be the best card in the entire set. I'm not quite certain on that, but I have an inkling that that may well be the case. Even without Oath of Gideon, you can ultimate her the turn after you cast her, and with Oath of Gideon, you can do it the very turn you cast her, and just draw all of the cards. Seems very strong. And that will do it for this installment. Please join me next time when we conclude this journey with the multicolored and land cards of Kaladesh. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please leave a like below. It helps tremendously. And subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. I have been Tevaron, and until next time, friends, be excellent to each other.